Hey, this is Nick the Mining Book Guy. It is the afternoon of Sunday, September 27th, 2020, and this video should be going out before the open on the Canadian markets on September 28th for my new pick, Thor Explorations THX on the TSXV. Now, I need to immediately say I'm going to have more details about how to manage this pick at the end of this video. But for the people out there that, um, you know, don't want to sit through this whole thing, or you just want a really concise idea on what to do here. Obviously, I want to explain why this is a good pick. Unfortunately, it popped from 21 to 23 cents Canadian on Friday on almost no volume. Something I will address at the end of the video. I was really hoping it would stay at 21, but I think that this is a very good trade opportunity that could turn into a longer term investment. And so I just want to be clear, probably better to not try to um, push up the price too much right at the open unless there is news today, which I'm not necessarily expecting. But I'll, again, at the end of the video, I'll be explaining there should be a lot of news flow. And I would say that, the target would be well over 30 cents. But again, that's why see if you can pick up shares between 21 and 23 and maybe a little bit higher than that. You can go to the end of the video now, the last 4 or 5 minutes or so, if you want more of that explanation. But for now, I want to go into some of the timeline and value drivers. I guess just before that though, being clear, I'm completely independent from the company. I may buy or sell shares at any time, and I haven't taken any compensation like for any other company I've done videos on in the past. And all errors are mine and mine alone. But I am pretty excited about this one, as I'm excited about any other of my picks when they come up. Before talking more about Thor, though, just on Matador. So this, for the few people who've joined the email list in the last 2 weeks, this was my last pick 2 weeks ago. And Matador Mining, MZZ on the ASX. Kind of interesting. It is trading literally at the same price as when it opened after my video exactly 2 weeks ago. My video was at 42, but then it opened at 43 and a half. It went as high as I think 54, and it's, basically back where it started. And so I just want to make the comment. I never tell you guys when to sell, and I never tell you when I sell. And it can always be a mix. You could always sell a few shares here, hold on to more later. But I do have one friend I was really happy to hear. I think he bought some shares at 44 or 45 cents and he flipped them at 53. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. I am just telling you though, for this particular play for Matador, even though it's a bit of a trade, I have a very clear, in my opinion, 4 month target of roughly doubling, going to 80 cents to a dollar. And that's still true. And so I didn't sell any shares. I was thinking about it because it moved much more quickly than I expected. This definitely was not just a move based on my video. There's other buyers out there, but I did buy more shares at 41 and a half over the last couple days. So I just wanted to be clear about that because it's a little odd the way this traded. But in the case of Matador, I am sticking to 4 months. For me, that's roughly a medium term of expectations. And so we'll see what happens with Matador. I still really like it, and you can always go back to that video for my previous email. But on Thor, which is what this video is about, this I have more of. I think in within the next 1 to 2 months we could see some real nice move. I think there's a higher probability of that regardless of what the gold market does. So that's why I wanted to contrast Matador and Thor. Thor is probably my shortest term expectation of a move out of any videos I've done. Of course, you can always have a move right away. Ross can move. It was amazing. Went from 20 cents and it just started moving literally a few days after my video. But I think there's good reasons for Thor too. And so I am on the Beaver Creek Precious Metal Summit page. I had no reason to expect to want to buy anything at Beaver Creek. Thor was my last meeting. Very funny how Matador was my last meeting at Beaver Creek last year, and I ended up buying that. But Thor, this has become my third largest position. Totally wasn't expecting that. I will explain, I think, a little more about that at the end of the video as well. But if you wanted the lowdown on Thor, it's probably better just to listen to Shagan Lawson, the CEO. And basically, these all these links will be at the bottom of this video. This was a great presentation, very professional. I've known about this company for years, more on that in a second. But this is what the content of this video and my meeting with Shagan initially got me very excited. And then I talked to Shagan a few other times in the past week, doing crazy amounts of research, catching up on Thor. So this is mainly, sorry, there are multiple parts of value drivers here, but you can get everything you need to know about what's exciting about Thor by watching this video and by checking out this PowerPoint, which we will be discussing throughout my video. And hopefully this won't take too long, but you never know. But there are other things I researched, and the point of me even having other things to say is that there's other angles you can go at of why there's value here. I did so much research, and when I came across the media page, I found stuff that I had never found on Thor before. These little podcasts at the bottom, I'm so glad they were added, and I think I understand, like, they're maybe not hesitant, but they're not something that the company necessarily wants to showcase, but I'm glad they added them here. These were amazing podcasts. So again, these will be below in the notes of the video. And I would say this is a less of a priority to listen to than what I just showed you. This is the number one priority. You want to listen to that one. That'll be the first link I put below. But this is something I will share with even some of my non-mining friends as an incredible entrepreneurship story with Shagan, because this is really where you see how this company came from almost nothing and how much hustle and grit Shagan put in, and sweat equity, and I love it. I think this is better. This is like one of the best podcast stories out there. So I shouldn't push it too much, but I get excited about this because this is proof of, like, you want to make a dream happen. Shagan's making it happen. For Nigeria, and by the way, Shagan is British Nigerian, and I think, like, it's so cool using all the contacts he can and all resources possible to make this happen. So the link to the longer podcast is either through the Stitcher link. I actually prefer the YouTube link. Not very many people have watched it. I like YouTube because you can actually. Oops, that was a mistake. I was just gonna show real quick. So a friend of mine showed me you can do playback speed at a faster speed. That's what I usually do. Sorry, that's a side note there. But I love that if you have time. There is a shorter one that's also very good right after the mining in Daba in 2018. But these give you background on how the Senegal project, which is not the main thing we're going to be talking about, but that was a main focus. 2010, 2011, 2012, making things happen. And then eventually how difficult, but how satisfying I'm sure it was to make the main Nigeria project happen. So I haven't told you, all the value here, but I think there's a reason for that, because I personally came into the picture in the beginning of 2016 when I was early in my speculation days. So Thor holds a special place in my heart, because I learned so much from it. This might be of interest to some of you, especially those of you that know nothing about Thor, and you want to know some of the earlier days, and you want to know how to do research or due diligence on companies when they're microcaps and nobody else knows about them. This was something I created back in 2016 after I bought a bunch of shares, and I love it because so many people told me a company like this was a scam. Africa, Nigeria. I mean, there's the Africa part, there's the Nigeria part, there's the this was a company that like nobody knew about, and part of it is that Shagan's based in London, traveling back and forth between London and Nigeria and other parts of Africa, and it's listed in Canada. There are reasons for it being listed in Canada, in the podcast, and I wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't listed in Canada. But that's the funny thing. I know for a fact, because I was there. I bought my first shares. There's a few shares I think I got at 2 cents or 2.5 cents, like right here in February 2016, and I literally bought like 90% of the shares going through April or May, and it wasn't that much. You can see the volume is pretty low, but like this was the very first time I realized that you could be the only person buying shares in a stock, and and everyone can tell you you're wrong or you're crazy and you can make money. And so that gets me really excited because I feel like that's the path Shagan has been on for the last 10 years. And a lot of these mining entrepreneurs are like that. And so that was an important win for me, an important psychological boost for myself. And for Shagan, it was huge because it spiked because the Nigeria deal happened. And I kind of, go through that in the Thor case study, in basically in this link that I provided, which again I think is kind of fun, but you don't have to look at it. But this was the turning point where Thor already had a Senegal and a Burkina project, and they picked up the Segilola project in Nigeria. Now, timeline wise, there's only a few important points to me. 2016 was important. I actually sold a lot of shares here because I felt I didn't know what was going on with the Nigeria thing. This was an advanced project, and I started looking more towards smaller explorers, and that's been my focus over the coming years. But I was, you can see it's traded kind of in a range, and there were certain times where there was more volume, but a lot of times where there wasn't too much volume. Going through the timeline, a very important point was 2018. They were advancing that project, and Shagan actually won the Indaba Junior Investment Battlefield. And this is really cool. A lot of people haven't read this. I found a link where you can easily access the case study where he gets interviewed for winning this, where there were 60 other juniors involved. So that was pretty awesome. This was down in South Africa. And this is important because he was looking to raise money to build this mine. And that's a difficult process in itself. And this was a direct link to getting a full investment from the Africa Finance Corps, which I'm going to also detail a little bit later in this video. So that was an important turning point. Now, it took a while to finalize that financing, but basically by 2018, things were moving forward further. And the point I was going to make here is, in terms of retail, barely anyone was talking about this. Because this is a Canadian listed company, but the company is listed or is a lot of or Shagan's mostly based in London, and I would say that some of the marketing is based out of London. There's definitely more Europeans coming in, but there's kind of this disconnect of Canadian and European markets, and that's maybe one of the reasons why it's just kind of hanging out, not really doing too much. But you can see right here, June, there was this spike. So before that spike, there's a guy, I have to give it, there's a lot of people who have gotten interested in Thor that I know indirectly, and Ostro Chris is one of those, and I know some others, but I have to give a shout out to Ostro Chris at co.ca, because in April, there was like almost no talk about Thor, and he kind of started getting these other retail people kind of interested, or maybe other people were kind of getting interested on their own. But this is a lot of posts. This was really surprising to me, and there's a lot of other names of people that I know here, and this has basically been since April, and that's a lot of posts up until now, and that is great. This is North American, European, even some Australian people, and they're getting interested in the stock without someone like me saying anything. And that's important because when I was saying stuff about it in 2016, no one cared. I mean, no one else really owned it besides me. And it's better for people to get interested on their own. I think that's an important signal. Around the same time, and basically in July, Thor had a very nice raise after they got their full financing for the Segilola mine. But what's important to me is that Paradigm was one of the lead agents, and Paradigm is a very well-respected broker house in Canada. And I think finally Thor is going to get the coverage it deserves. And it's not a coincidence. People are looking to Africa, they're looking to new jurisdictions, and they saw serious value here. And I know after talking to Shagan that a combination of European and North American investors were here. So I think there's going to be this very interesting, mixture of London, London and maybe other European and then North American groups getting interested in the stock, maybe even a London listing in the future. But for now, it's very good to have that Canadian coverage. And I think the momentum is rolling on the institutional side and on the retail side. So the other thing that's notable, there was this spike up to 28. It was actually on very low volume, but in general, you can see this big volume here. Again, I will talk about that a little bit more at the end, but at right now we're at 23 cents. We're not, at that 28-cent level. So why should this go up immediately, or why are we interested right now? There are three key things that I separate. There's the current project, which is fantastic. There's the expansion of the current project. So the main project, Segilola in Nigeria. There's expanding Segilola, and then there's Duda in Senegal. We're going to go through all three of those fairly quickly. This is just the project, the DFS. Actually, one thing that might be noticeable right away: pre-tax, post-tax are the same. This is one of the benefits of Nigeria. There's a tax holiday for the first 5 years to incentivize people like Shagan to come in and build a nice mine. This is an economic mine, a very solid mine at $1,300 US gold, because the capex would be lower, significantly lower than at that level. At 1800, even below where we're at now, is 300 million US. Now, I don't want to delve into it too much, but most people who focus on advanced developers and going into construction and production, they look at an NPV or a NAV, for what a company's worth. And I can tell you, at this price, this should have stayed up here and gone through 30 cents just on that, and it didn't. And who knows why? That in itself, we don't have to do anything. This should re-rate. I am not convinced at all that Nigeria is the reason. I think it's just the momentum just hasn't quite built yet. I think it's building right now. So literally, you can buy and expect a re-rate just by more attention coming through. But that on its own is not enough for me to tell you why this would be a good trade over the next month or two, because sometimes those things take a while to materialize. So this is a high grade open pit mine, but as one thing besides Nigeria that I think maybe people think there is execution risk, which is fine, but really most of the time that happens when the production already starts. One thing I really liked with talking to Shagan is that I looked into Michael Kelly, who basically is the general manager. And what was really cool was that there was a blurb about how he made the coca mine happen in Eritrea. Interestingly, the coca mine used to be owned by Chalice Gold Mines, which now is doing this really awesome discovery in Western Australia in nickel and platinum. But 10 years ago, they had this neat mine in Eritrea, also high grade, also open pit, also relatively small but still a decent size, just like Segilola. He made it happen on time, or ahead of time, under budget, and he did it with a Chinese contractor. And it was bought by a Chinese. And Mike Kelly came on with and did work with a Chinese contractor to basically make it happen. And that's what's happening at Thor right now with Segilola. Norinco is the Chinese contractor building the mine, with Mike Kelly, leading it. So you have these parallels, which I think should give some confidence. But I have to say, this is still something that's, it's a question mark for me. Once the mine gets built, is it going to be run well? I think there's a good chance, a much better chance than the market's giving it credit for. So I think that's what I'm getting at here. But I am actually much more interested in the exploration potential, as why it should move in the short term. This is something I think Shagan's going to highlight more. I actually had trouble. It wasn't in the PowerPoint, but I just wanted to be clear. On July 22nd, there was a news release. And I love this plan. You have the resource development drilling, near mine and regional exploration, and underground. All these things work together to immediately enhance the economics of the Segilola mine. And the thing is, we have these nice reserves, and I think everybody always says you have lots of exploration potential. But many of the smaller mines, they're small for a reason. They've been drilled to hell, and there just isn't that much easy, low-hanging fruit left. And Segilola, perhaps out of any mine in the world, has the most low-hanging fruit. And I'm not joking about that, because no one's done drilling in Nigeria. Not even drilling. They haven't even done basic soil sampling and auger drilling. That is what Thor has just done. This is a new news release, and these look like very interesting shallow auger anomalies where we're going to get results really soon. So this is right next to the pit, and then we have a lot of drilling going on under the pit. And it's very possible that we quickly go to 450,000 ounces of reserves, 500,000, and maybe even like, we'll by early next year we'll already know that. But I think some of the drill results that are going to be coming out in the coming months, they can they'll the market will be able to pick up that the NBPV should immediately go up to from 300 million US to 350 million US or to 400 million US. That is not a joke. That in itself, I think, is going to get attention, especially from institutional people who really understand this stuff. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about for this short-term re-rate. And longer term, there is, well, actually, I guess, some of this drilling is the regional exploration, and that possibly would get a re-rate as well. There's a lot of opportunity here. Total blue sky, first mover advantage, and nobody has done any work at all. Like, I mean, we're just talking Nigeria. There's a reason Nigeria hasn't had work done. It was an oil-focused country, and so there's a lot of things coming together for people to have a really good reason for Nigeria to be perhaps one of the top three, if not one of the top, quote unquote, surprise emerging jurisdictions in the mining world. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but there's a lot of reasons to believe that in the coming years and even in the next few months for many heads to turn related to that. But there's a third thing, and this is actually crucial to me for why I'm saying this is such a good trade here, and I think there's a floor. The Senegal project, which was the first major important project picked up, back in 2010, 2011, it is an incredibly strategic little sliver of land. And this is really important. It doesn't matter how small your land is if it's just filled with exciting anomalies and there's already been discoveries. There's been a very important discovery at Makosa here, and then there's a new discovery at Maka, but there's so much more drilling that's going to be done and that should be done, and likely more discoveries to be made. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is what's amazing. Like, Senegal to me is like, that is the country in West Africa for the next 12 months. And I've already explained that many times through my Chester videos. But in terms of placement, the Mako mine, now owned by Resolute, Massawa, Sabodala, now owned by Teranga and used to be owned by Randgold, Makabingui, owned by Basari, and then there's an Oriole and IM Gold are drilling right over here, and then Chester's drilling over here. All of those are potentially within trucking distance or within basically a 1+1=3 environment. And I think many of you realize, how that consolidation works. And that's what's so strategic about this. Duda's right in the middle, and there's going to be an important drill program, I think, starting in the next month, within the next 1 to 2 months. And that's going to add to the news flow. But in terms of valuation, I would tell you, like, honestly, if Shagan was running a company where this was the only project where it's at right now, and it was trading at 30 million Canadian market cap, I would buy a big position with no hesitation. And if it was like 25 million or 20 million market cap, I would load the boat because I think it would have a really good chance to double on its own. So that effectively is about 20% of the value of Thor, and it provides, I think, a further cushion to why I don't think Thor is going to go under 20 cents Canadian. I mean, you have all these positive catalysts, but this is a an important backstop, and I think a lot of people who know Thor, they don't give any value to this project. There's also a Burkina project, which I'm not going to talk about, and that was my actual initial interest back in 2016. But the Burkina project, probably is worth something like 5 million, but we can just give it a zero value right now. I know I didn't clearly explain all the valuation stuff, and I don't really have enough time to go through all of that. But I did want to give one excellent, surprisingly good comp, because Thor is a tricky story where you have near production and you have lots of exploration, even with a few different projects, and a surprisingly good comp is Mako Mining. MKO on the TSXV, and I'm just looking. They have very good materials. It's interesting. They're showing the market shares outstanding are actually very similar to Thor. And even the options and warrants are kind of similar, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But the market cap is effectively twice Thor, or at least at a 44-cent share price. And if we're looking at 42 cents, this I think these numbers are correct. It's about 275 million Canadian. Thor right now, I think when you actually not including the options, even at 23 cents, I think it's 130, 140 million Canadian. So it's roughly half the valuation of Mako. Now, Mako, to give them full credit, phenomenal marketing. I've been really impressed with the messaging, and this is a high grade open pit. But one thing that caught my eye, I actually added these little THX.Vs. It's funny that within their materials, what is the project that is closest in terms of cash cost versus grade or capex versus IRR? It's the Segulola project for Thor. San Albino is the main project for Mako, and Thor stacks up quite well. In fact, Thor is running off of a DFS while San Albino's running off just a PEA, which some people would consider pretty risky, but who knows? Either project might not work out, or it might work. It might run swimmingly. They're kind of in a similar stage in that respect, and I think San Albino really gets running a few months before Thor does. But it's a smaller project than Thor's project. But both of them have fantastic exploration potential in these emerging jurisdictions. One could argue that Nicaragua is safer and better known than Nigeria, and I wouldn't have an issue with that. But you have to take everything into consideration, and honestly, it's the market cap that really, that's what we come back to. And this is where I'm not saying Thor should immediately double to be the same level as Mako. And I'm not saying that Thor is going to have, phenomenal marketing the same way that Mako does, but Thor has news flow that they haven't ever had in the past that's coming down the pipeline, and all the momentum that I've already described to you. So I think there's a very, very good chance that Thor basically gets closer to the Mako market cap, and basically has a very good chance to get past 40 cents, get to 45 or 50 cents. And that's a big reason that I'm so excited about this, at least in terms of a trade, to try to get closer to that level. Now, a few quick negatives. Thor does have warrants that are. There were full warrants in this one when they were having a little more trouble raising money in 2018. They did have to give these full 3-year warrants, and so they will expire or need to be exercised by August of next year. So that's a little ways away, but it could cap the price a bit. They're at 28 cents. They're out of the money warrants right now. And again, just looking at there's actually warrants that are kind of a little similar for Mako. So all these companies have these types of things, but it's something just to be aware of down the road. It could cap the price a little bit. And then something that I'm sure would come up with a lot of people. I was very surprised. This map that I shared on Twitter got a huge response, and it's just a French terrorism map. I was surprised so many people took a look at it, but I think a lot of people, they don't realize the various risks. One thing very interesting, I wasn't even looking at this for Nigeria the first time, but if you look at Nigeria, you'll notice, very scary looking up in the northeast, and in the southwest is where it seems the safest. And if we go back to where Segulola is located, it is near Lagos. It's basically here. And basically the most prospective part is the whole western side, which in general is a safer area. And we look at Burkina and we look at Mali, and overall, from a terrorist or risk standpoint, they have some really scary parts, and they have some parts that are a little better. And so the same thing applies to Nigeria. Honestly, I think an argument could be made that this is safer than much of West Africa right now, and that's a good sign. But of course, there's always political risks. I don't think there's any elections coming up, and Nigeria is still an emerging jurisdiction. But the mining code has really improved. Again, the positive momentum is there because Canadians are putting money into it. People in London are putting money into it, and I did want to make. If there was one other point I wanted to make that's really important. Africa Finance Corps is the main funder, both debt and equity. They are basically funding this to production, and they are part of this big Nigeria tract. So keep in mind, Nigerians own, including Shagan, own a huge amount of this project. This is a project being that it's going to be championed by the country. They want it to succeed to open up mining to the world, and I think that's really exciting. I think it's, as a single project, it's probably the most influential project on any one country in the world right now that's basically being built next year. I know there's a few other ones in the world, but this is really important because Nigeria really has so much potential. And I would recommend, checking out the Africa Finance Corps website or just the Wikipedia page. I mean, just as an example of why it's so important, almost half of the Africa Finance Corps is owned by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and I mean that as a positive. There's a lot of Nigerian entities that are really banking on Thor succeeding, and all the benefits that come from that. So I think that's a huge endorsement of Thor, and there's also an endorsement of Nigeria being really serious. Like, a lot of important money is going into Thor. So hopefully I've given you a good indication of why Thor's undervalued, and some things that you might not have known that are going to help you. But this is now the last few minutes of the video for people that maybe skip to this point, or they really want to get a better idea of how this trade should develop. Now, the thing that is creating a lot of this volume, I suspect, and part of this was talking to Shagan, but I never really know exactly what's going on, and I think we don't know exactly who's selling, but it was very clear to people in the CEO.ca room and myself, especially following the level twos. There was, at 21 cents on Monday, there was this huge show all, almost 2 million shares, and it was all Canaccord. And if you see here on Friday, a bunch of these sells were Canaccord. So there has to be at least one big seller, and probably just one big seller that has actually kept this price down. And that created liquidity for me to buy. Honestly, there was more liquidity than I expected, because Shagan already told me he was expecting some liquidity during our Beaver Creek meeting a week and a half ago. So that's what got me in. But my my position got even bigger than I expected, because I kept thinking, the liquidity might dry up. So we could argue that this is another possible risk. How much selling pressure is there? But I really think if it was strong selling pressure, we would have gone down further. We've just been hanging out. Basically this whole last week, it was at 21 until it hit 23. And that was a little annoying. I would much prefer it to be at 21, and for all of you guys to basically soak up what the remaining liquidity is at 21. Right now, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I know that this is not the Canaccord seller, but I can tell you, see, ATS is it's kind of the equivalent of the THX in Australia, for anyone in Australia listening. I saw some Canaccord show up, and it's almost like they're playing games. I don't know why they didn't just keep the show all, but the point is, there's probably still a Canaccord seller out there, and maybe it's upwards of 1 million shares. So the ideal situation would there be no news on Monday, an hour or two after this video comes out. All of you guys get a chance to soak up the remaining liquidity between 21 and 23 cents. And then news comes out anytime after that, basically later in the week or next week. I would say there's a very tiny chance news would come out tomorrow or on Monday. And maybe it does, but I'm not expecting it to. But if it does, then you got to chase. But let's assume you don't have to chase. Then I would say it's a 50-50 chance that news comes out this week versus next week. I think there's a 95% chance it comes out within the next 2 weeks. And just so you know, and I think it's fine for me to share this. Shagan told me there were some delays with getting some red tape, getting the assays going. But once they get going, they should be coming out every 2 weeks. So we should have, once whatever assays come out, Nigeria related results, we should just have news after news after news through the end of the year. And then the Senegal news starts to kick in too. So I'm really excited about all of that, but I just don't know the perfect timing. So I can't, it's possible after this video comes out, this goes up to 24 or 25. Honestly, if I think buying up to 25 is still decent, maybe even 26 or 27, but I really wouldn't want my email list people to be buying up to 30, for instance, because I think that that's a first important benchmark. And, it'd be great for some of you you might want to get out in the low 30 cents. And then some of you might want to hold further to 35 or 40 or even 45 and maybe 50. And some of this might be driven by results that really exceed expectations, like a new discovery or some, one of these satellite deposits really turns into something. So I'm throwing a lot of scenarios and I might not be making sense to everybody, but I'm just trying to say I have a feeling that this is going to keep building momentum, but at the very least, within the next month, we could break 30 cents and everyone should be happy, if you're making, 20, 30, 40% return. And I think that's going to happen regardless of where the gold market is. But of course, if gold goes up, it's even better. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about those different scenarios. And I'm hoping that there's enough liquidity where a bunch of my email subscribers basically can get in at the same place that I got in, because my cost average is about 21 and a half. I started buying on Friday, 2 Fridays ago, right after Beaver Creek at 22. And then I just kept buying more at 21. So hopefully that is helpful to you. Maybe you want to just watch this, but I think this is the best news flow going into the end of the year. It's the best story that nobody knows about except for, the few funds that are in it and the various, CEO.ca people here. And I, again, like, I love it that these guys figured this out on their own, that there's excitement here. And hopefully we all have a fun ride. And at the very least, in the next month or two, we see a re-rate in Thor. Maybe I'll make another video if some other good stuff happens. But I hope I gave you, a good reason to consider Thor for, at a minimum, a very good trade. And it probably will keep going up into Q1 next year, assuming construction, happens. So I'll talk about that in a future video, assuming everything's moving forward. But we have a lot of good reasons for the positive momentum to continue for Thor, for THX on the TSXV. And, we'll see what happens the next week or two whenever that news comes out and the news gets going. All right, this is Nick the Mining Book Guy. Thank you so much for listening. Talk soon.